Well, have a look at the Intergenerational Report. Just have a flick through, pause and have a look at the graphs. Because what all the graphs are these wobbly lines that oscillate madly for the last 10 years, and then you kind of get to the present, and then it's just a straight line out for the next 40.
So basically, if you look at what's happened in the past, you
all
can
volatile.
see all volatility. It's
all
up
over
and
the
down,
place. Yep.
because that's just what happens
But
in
the
life.
future,
Smooth sailing.
yeah, like skating on glass. It's just all the way out to the horizon. Fresh air.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
Dead, buried, cremated.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Won't hurt.
Australia's basically done for. We'll just end up being a third-rate economy. A banana republic.
How good is Australia?
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast demystifying the big economic issues in Australia and putting them in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute, and today we're going to be talking about how, well, basically, we're all going to hell in a handbasket. No, I'm not talking about climate change for a change, but the Intergenerational Report. These reports from Treasury project outlooks for the economy and the Australian government's budget over the next 40 years, the type of big picture long-term thinking we actually always talk about wanting the government to do. They examine the long-term sustainability of current policies and how demographic, technological and other structural trends may affect the economy and the budget. That's straight from the Treasury website, by the way.
A landmark report out today forecasts that Australia will have budget deficits for the next 40 years.
In the Treasury's Intergenerational Report will be released today. It's forecasting a dramatic fall in the population rate alongside the dramatic fall in the fertility rate.
A yearly snapshot of how Australia's economy and population will look like in 40 years is out later today. The pandemic looms large.
Intergenerational Report comes out every 5 years. It was delayed 1 year because of the COVID crisis.
Go to the Intergenerational Report because that is sobering reading at this time.
Intergenerational Report are sobering news, and that is that we're going to have to do more with less money.
So today we're talking to our chief economist Richard Dennis about why the government is trying to scare us all about the future, even though it doesn't necessarily think things like climate change are that much worth worrying about. G'day, Richard.
Hi, Eb.
So firstly, tell us a little bit about what the Intergenerational Report is and how good it is at making long-term predictions.
Oh, the Intergenerational Report is great at making long-term predictions. It's just the predictions are crap. I mean, it's hundreds of predictions, and this is the fifth time we've done it. So in the prediction-making business, this is as good as it gets. It's just the predictions are wrong.
They're not that accurate.
No, not even close, not even consistent. They don't even make much sense often. Look, the Intergenerational Report came from Peter Costello. It was back in 2002 we had the first one. And the problem we had was the government had too much money.
Terrible problem to have.
Big problem to have. Well, especially when you're in coalition with the National Party, right? Because they are always like, well, spend it on me then.
Yeah.
So back in 2002, Peter Costello kind of had too much money, and we just privatised parts of Telstra, so we had even more too much money. And he was under enormous pressure to spend more money on health and education and increase unemployment benefits and all these things that he didn't want to do. So instead of solving problems today, what he decided was he was in charge of fixing the future. He was like, well, no, I might be treasurer now and you might blame me for things or thank me for things, but really I want you to look to 2050. And I've just asked Treasury to knock up a big report and it says we're going to be broke in 2050. So I'd love to spend more on health and education, but I got a big fat report that says in 40, 50 years' time we'll be broke. That's why I can't spend more on your health today.
It was set up way back by the Liberal Treasurer Peter Costello to track big spending pressures coming from the ageing population and, importantly, the sustainability of current budget settings.
So in that theme or vein...
strategy.
Some of the headlines for this Intergenerational Report were pretty scary. The Australian's headline was, I believe, Our Bleak Future. Births to fall, deficits to stay.
Yeah. No, look, they've all been bleak. Like everyone has kind of had the same headline. deficits in the future, health spending to balloon, ageing population, too many people dependent on welfare. Like, I could write the press release for one of these things before it's even written, let alone released.
And be more accurate than the predictions in it.
Look, my prediction about their press releases would be 100% accurate. Their predictions about the future, not even close to right. But again, the purpose of the document, the actual purpose of the document is to say we are on the wrong track. They've been telling us for years, if we cut taxes for high-income earners, the economy will grow. If we privatise things, the economy will grow. Basically, if we do all these things that they want to do and that a lot of people don't want to do, they're like, trust us, it'll make the economy grow. So then they generate these intergenerational reports, say, oh, yeah, sure, the economy might grow, but not nearly fast enough. So we still, even though we expect growth, we still can't afford to spend more money on sick people, old people, or poor people.
Yeah.
So they need to have these horror scenarios in the future. But of course, there's this kind of economic contradiction. They're on the one hand, implement these policies and we'll be rich. Oh, what's the intergenerational report say? Oh, we'll be broke.
Yeah.
So, well, what are we doing then?
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing all this stuff? And then that leaves aside just the outrageous, ridiculous arrogance of saying that here we can, in the first intergenerational report in 2002, talk about what's going to happen in 2050. To be clear, in 2002, there were no smartphones. Like in 2002, they weren't even imagined.
Yeah.
Right. There was no downloading movies at home. There was no streaming. There were people going to these.
Netflix came through the post, if it even was invented in 2002.
Let's never forget that Netflix's first business model was to post you your DVD. Right. So the idea, the ridiculous idea that any group of economists, no matter how smart, can sit down and talk about what the impact of things that haven't been invented yet will be on the economy decades after they retire is just absurd beyond comprehension. But in Australia, we call this the most important, legitimate exercise for economists to undertake. And it's the Wizard of Oz kind of stuff. There's nothing behind the veil.
Well, what this fifth intergenerational report does show is that the Australian economy continues to grow, that we have debt increasing, but it remains sustainable and low by international standards, but that we do have a major challenge ahead of us, namely the ageing of the population, the longer-term impacts of COVID and the need for Australia to boost productivity.
Talked a lot in the past. Long-term listeners will be familiar with the term right-wing ratchet. What's that, Richard, and how does that come into play?
So the right-wing ratchet is the coalition's long-term, multi-decadal political strategy. People say they don't have a long-term vision. Rubbish. The vision is simple. Whenever the economy is going well, cut taxes for your friends. Whenever the economy turns bad, cut spending on your enemies. So we're always ratcheting down the size of the public sector. Whenever there's disposable money, whenever we have a good year, a good few years, it's like, oh, the economy's going well, I can afford to give a tax cut to high-income earners. And those tax cuts cause future budget deficits.
Because there's less revenue coming in from tax.
So the next time the economy slows down a bit, it's like, oh, no, we're in deficit.
Not enough money.
Not enough money. So, well, why don't you jack the taxes back up? No, what I thought I'd do is spend less on unemployment benefits, spend less on health, spend less on education. So the intergenerational report really has at its heart the idea that we have to keep taxes low. We don't. We might choose to.
But other countries choose differently.
Oh, I've heard of them. I've been there. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, highest tax countries in the world, highest GDP per capita, happiest, longest life expectancy. It's hell over there. It's just hell. All right, we can't be like them. We have to be like Singapore. We have to be like the US. We have to cut taxes. So the intergenerational report literally has these assumptions built into it. It assumes that we can't ever increase tax. And then it assumes that we'll just spend more and more on health and education as far as the eye can see. And then we say, oh, look at that. There's no revenue, lots of spending, deficit.
Got to cut the spending.
Well, of course. I mean, imagine if I forecast a car company was going to spend a lot of money making cars and not sell any of them. Yep, guess what? You'd make a loss.
Yeah.
Right? But no one will behave like that. Like the silent question that's never asked in the Intergenerational Report is, would governments really, decade after decade, not do something if everything was this off course? Like, if we think it's off course, why would you stay on the wrong course for decades to come? It's just ridiculous.
And so, again, long-term listeners will be familiar with...
Are you saying I'm repetitive?
No. But I think it's important. I think we're consistent,
We
Richard.
are consistent.
And I think so many of these things come up in public policy debates time and again, but it's useful to be able to kind of pull back the veil, as you were mentioning earlier, and show people what's behind it. So we have talked a lot about, in the past, economic modelling, and that if you put garbage assumptions into a model, you come out with garbage results.
Yep.
What can you tell us about some of the assumptions that are in this intergenerational report?
Right, well, let's go back. What we have to do with the Intergenerational Report is forecast what the population will be over the next 50 years.
Yeah.
And to some extent, that's one of the few things we can control. We can't control how many kids people have, but we can control the number of people who we let in.
Yeah.
So we've got a fair bit of control over population. We have to forecast what's called the participation rate. What percentage of people what percentage of people in Australia of working age are going to choose to work? Wobbles around a bit. We can't predict it accurately 3 months out. We can't predict it 12 months out, but by gee, we're willing to have a red hot go for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
So population, not too bad. Participation, rubbery.
Who knows?
And then productivity growth, the rate at which we get better at doing stuff. So productivity just means how much output can you get per unit of input. So labour productivity, how many coffees an hour can a barista make? Right, we can measure their productivity very easily. So, I don't know, what do you think the rate of innovation in coffee machines will be over the next 30 years? Because literally someone has to make this assumption.
Yeah.
Right, what will happen to the proportion of people that will be working from home in 30 years' time?
Yeah. Probably a lot different now than it was 18 months ago.
Hopefully, but higher or lower.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Like, so when we forecast this stuff out a year or two, we get it wrong. We know this.
Well, I'm quite sure the Intergenerational Report didn't forecast a global
Well, exactly. So we've got this wonderful... we've had the same government in power since 2013. We've got the Intergenerational Report from 2015, and then we've got the latest one for 2021. So in that 6-year period, there was only one government in place. And in 2015, they said, productivity is about to surge. It collapsed. They didn't, funnily enough, forecast a COVID crisis. They got wage growth completely wrong. They got the participation rate wrong. That's over 6 years.
Yeah.
Right, but the beautiful thing, I encourage people, have a look at the Intergenerational Report. Just have a flick through, pause and have a look at the graphs. Because what all the graphs are these wobbly lines that oscillate madly for the last 10 years, and then you kind of get to the present, and then it's just a straight line out for the next 40.
So basically, if you look at what's happened in the past, you
all
can
volatile.
See all volatility. It's
all
up
over
and
the
down,
place. Yep.
Because that's just what happens
but
in
the
life.
future...
Smooth sailing.
Yeah, like skating on glass. It's just all the way out to the horizon. Fresh air.
In 4 decades' time, 23% of the nation will be aged 65 or above, up from 16% now. Health funding per person will more than double to 26% of government spending. Aged care spending will soar from 1.2% to 2.1% of GDP, and there'll be fewer people working to pay the bill, with labour force participation to fall from 66.3% to 63.6%.
So tell me what it says about specifically, you've mentioned productivity.
Yep.
And that we're not very good at calculating it, but what does it predict in this report?
The hilarious thing about this report, again, we've got the one from 2015, so we know what Treasury thought in 2015 productivity was going to look like in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060. Ridiculous stuff. So in 2015, we know that they thought productivity would grow at 1.5% out to that period. And then since then, we've cut taxes, we've changed the industrial relations system, we've brought in the Building Construction Commission, we've changed communication policy. Indeed, we've built new car parks there, but I don't know if you've heard about the car parks. But if you listen,
$500 million worth.
Yeah, and if you listen carefully, the minister says these are good. These car parks will boost productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So whenever governments want to do anything these days, they say it'll boost productivity. It's a beautiful bit of econobabble. No one quite knows what it means, but it sounds important. So back in 2015, we had the forecast productivity is going to go at 1.5%. We've had 6 years of coalition policy. Virtually every policy they announce, they say this is going to boost productivity, this is going to boost productivity, the car parks are going to boost productivity. What does Treasury think? Well, they're not persuaded at all. According to Treasury, their long-term forecast of productivity growth exactly the same as 6 years ago. So in short, the tax cuts, Treasury don't think will work. The industrial relations changes won't work. Communications, car parks, infrastructure, you name it.
None of it has an impact on productivity.
Well, not according to Treasury. The people that are costing the policy, the people that are making the forecast, presumably the people listening to what the Treasurer's got to say. We can imagine them all sitting there and modelling HQ at Treasury. Oh, the government's got some new tax policies they say are going to boost productivity. What do you reckon? Nah. Infrastructure? Nah. So the forecasts in the 2021 Intergenerational Report, the forecasts of productivity are exactly the same as the ones in 2015.
Yeah.
Which just raises a simple question. What the hell was all of that reform about?
Yeah.
And the answer is redistribution. Right? Because there's only two reasons to kind of change these policies. In the short term, there's winners and losers, but we're always told, don't worry about who wins and who loses. We'll all be better off in the long run. Not according to Treasury, we won't.
Going to lift all boats, but actually it doesn't.
Actually, it's just check out my new boat.
And that's according to the government's own modelling.
Yeah.
All of its reforms have done diddly squat.
Nothing. Or here's the punchline. Or Treasury secretly believe it will boost productivity, in which case all the scary stories about the future are crap.
Yeah.
So which is it? Like if we've got 6 years of policy that's delivered nothing, or does Treasury secretly believe it's going to deliver lots, but they don't want to tell us that because they're trying to scare us about the future?
Pretty bleak picture. Decades of deficits, we're told, declining fertility, sluggish growth and productivity. This should be a wake-up call for reform.
Impacts of COVID and the need for Australia to boost productivity will continue.
And you've talked a little bit about the right-wing ratchet, and I think you were telling me there's some assumptions in here around income tax cuts as well.
Yep.
What's in there?
Oh, this is the best one. So this is deep in the appendices. But there's this kind of implicit assumption. And when I say implicit, I mean they don't write it clearly. They make you figure it out. But they predict that from 2030 onwards, we're going to cut income taxes every year.
Every single year?
Every single year.
Like out for the next 40 years?
From 2030 to 2060, we're going to cut income tax rates every year. Because if we didn't, Eb, we'd have too much money.
Oh, that's a problem.
Well, they've got this assumption in there that there's a cap, 23.9% of GDP. We're not allowed to collect more tax than that. No, that's fine, but it's not economics.
23.9%, that's not based on any economic theory?
None, nada zip, right? Well, the idea of a cap has no basis in economics.
Yep.
Why 23.9 instead?
Why not 23.8?
24.1. I've always been a 24.13 kind of guy, right? So the idea of a cap, not economics.
Yep.
The selection of a cap, not economics. But when you put this arbitrary number in, what happens is, because Treasury anticipate that we're going to get 80% richer in the next 50 years, right? Real wages, after inflation, no inflation, forget inflation, real wages are going to grow 80%, according to Treasury. That means there's going to be a lot more rich people in the future. These are terrible things.
Yep.
Income's going up, number of very high income earners going up. And the problem with all these high income earners is they might actually pay a bit more tax.
Yeah.
But Treasury have said, no, there's no way we could allow the Australian government to collect as much tax as they do in Denmark or Germany or France.
Yeah.
So in order to keep the tax collections low, they've got this assumption that we'll cut taxes every year. So all of this, we're going to have big deficits in the future. Yep. Government's cutting taxes every year going, oh, look at that deficit. What are we going to do about the deficit?
That we caused
by cutting taxes again. You can imagine someone sitting around going, well, maybe we shouldn't cut taxes this year. 23.9. Someone wrote a report back in 2021, and here we are in 2040. We are not allowed to not cut taxes.
Yeah.
We're obliged to cut taxes because that's what some bureaucrat in Treasury put in a report a long time ago.
And again, that's all in this service of the idea that we can't afford to do certain things. So
Exactly.
We're having a big debate at the moment about a cost blowout for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yep.
Let's turn to the Intergenerational Report. It shows the population growing older and not as fast, and key programs costing much, much more, like Medicare and the NDIS. People will be nervous about the government wanting to slash them. What guarantees can you give?
We've always said that we'll continue to fully fund the NDIS, that we have seen health spending on our watch and education spending on our watch.
I mean, it always seems that these are the things that we can't afford.
Yep.
But there's plenty of things, car parks, for example,
Car parks.
where money seems to be no object.
$500 million for a war memorial, knockdown fixer-upper.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it's part of the right-wing ratchet. You know, whenever times are good, cut taxes for your friends. Whenever times are bad, cut spending on your enemies. Yeah, when times are good, spend money on whoever you want. Don't want to spend money on someone, don't be democratically honest. Don't say, well, you know, there's competing priorities and I'd rather spend money on car parks and a war memorial than domestic violence crisis centres.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a democracy. I got elected, you didn't. These are my choices. You know, I'm proud of them. No, when it comes to domestic violence crisis centre, oh, yeah, I agree. We should spend more money on it, but times are tough. We don't have any money. Can we knock down a perfectly good war memorial and build a big one? Sure, here's $500 million.
Yeah. Can we give $130 billion in income tax cuts to
Why
high-income
not?
earners?
Why not? Let's give $9,000 a year to people earning over $200,000.
Which, to be clear, listeners, is the plan.
That's the
currently.
plan. Stage 3 tax cuts.
They're not in yet, but they're legislated.
Yeah. Cost of submarines is blown out. Oh, well, need our subs.
Yeah.
You know, so again, it's a democracy. We're one of the richest countries in the world. We can afford to do anything we want, but we can't afford to do everything we want. That's why who we elect counts.
Yeah.
That's why it matters.
I wanted to finish on what I think is the big issue that's going to impact on everyone's future in 40 years' time, which is climate change. Does the Intergenerational Report have much to say or have any assumptions in there on climate change?
Look, it gets a mention, but when we look at the elaborate kind of phony complexity that goes into projecting the participation rate and to inventing arbitrary caps on tax, we don't put anything like that amount of effort into trying to say what will the costs to the economy, but more importantly, what will the cost to our society and to our environment be of unchecked climate change? No. So again, this is the kind of farce where this report was invented back in 2002. It was invented for a specific purpose to make it easier for the treasurer of the day tell people, I know I keep saying we're going to get rich one day, but we're not going to get rich enough. The purpose of the report is to constrain our spending. If the report was really looking at the big challenges that affect us intergenerationally, you would think it would all be about things like climate change, things like access to housing, the benefits and costs of continuing to neglect generations of people living in remote Indigenous communities. Like if, and it's a giant if, we cared about intergenerational equity, we'd be putting most of our effort into the economic, social and environmental challenges that have the biggest potential to affect following generations. But that's not what the report's for.
Yeah.
The report's designed to tell this generation, pull your head in, you can't have enough any more lollies, mum can't afford dessert.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we're not stopping to get ice cream on the way home.
And I guess, unfortunately, unlike Treasury, climate change obeys the laws of physics.
It does. It's coming whether we predict it or not.
All right. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you wanted to mention about?
No, but please have a flick through and just enjoy. You don't have to be an economist to see that all those straight lines are just ridiculous.
All right. Well, that's all we've got time for today. That was just a far more interesting conversation about the Intergenerational Report.
It's a must-read,
I
Eb.
was
A
prepared
must-read.
for. Thanks very much, Richard.
Thanks, Eb.
This episode was recorded on Tuesday the 6th of July, and things may have changed since recording, although probably not productivity assumptions. You can visit australiainstitute.org.au for all our latest research, and we're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a _N_T. Richard Dennis is at RDNS_TAI, and our producer Jennifer Macy is at Jennifer Macy. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music by Blue Dot Sessions. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone who donated to the Australia Institute's end of financial year appeal. All donations, big and small, really help, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.